BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Alright, hello everybody. Today is Friday, another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. First, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who listened to yesterday's episode on Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Already got a lot of good comments coming in from all of you. Thank you so much. It really helps out the channel. And if you have anything to say about today's episode, talking all about the murder mystery surrounding the suspicious death of Margaretta Todd, you can put your ideas in the comments section down below. And I would just like to play a short video clip that will help us introduce some of the material. And this is about the book, The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd by Todd Wood and Walter Bosley. And hello. Much like last week, I'll be continuing onward with the Lost Future series, which is written by Todd Wood and Walter Bosley. Last week I did The Mystery of Ingersoll Lockwood, and I have an episode about that here on this channel. And it's about this guy, Ingersoll Lockwood, and how he could have possibly predicted the rise of Donald Trump. And it's called How Did This Writer from the 1800s Predict the Rise of Trump? And today I'll be talking about The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd, the second volume in the Lost Future series. And much like last week, the reason I wanted to do this little video segment is these are double covered books. They're double printed. The covers are identical, and I've never had a set of books exactly like this. Unfortunately, though, this photo here is of the title individual, Margaretta Todd, and that is the best photo that there is. There's also an appendix of photos in this book, The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd, but that is the highest quality photo that has been provided. And one more time, we have The Mystery of Ingersoll Lockwood and The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd in the Lost Future series. All right, let's get to the show. And before we truly begin, I would just like to say that if you hear any noises or anything in this episode, that's just me fumbling around with some of the pages in this book. Got some things marked here to discuss. And I would like to remind you guys that I am also the host of the program Astro Psych 400 here on YouTube. It is a different YouTube channel, actually. But some people were saying that they use this program, BlackBoxOnlineRadio, as a way to fall asleep at night. And I thought, well, why not create a podcast specifically designed to help people fall asleep? And you can get that on Astro Psych 400. And this is mostly coming out on the weekends, but you can always find some bonus episodes over there, as well as other videos about astrology, psychology, personality traits, lots of things on Astro Psych 400. And as always, please like and subscribe. And a great way that you can help out both channels is to go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse by me, Ned DEHAN. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the Teespring page. Feel free to have a look at some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. This story that we will talk about today, The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd, is one that I was not familiar with until I began corresponding with the author of this book, Todd Wood. And today we are going back to 1905. Margaretta Todd passed away on October 27th of that year, and the date on her coroner's report is October 31st, when the autopsy and the examination took place, and that was conducted by Gustav Scholler, a German-American coroner. Margaretta Todd was on a train from New York to Philadelphia, and what happened to her is somewhat of a mystery. In terms of the cause of death, she was beaten, her skull was pulverized, and then she was thrown in front of a train, or put on the train tracks rather, and she was hit by a train, and her legs were severed where the wheels of the locomotive would have connected. But the coroner, Gustav Scholler, said very clearly at the beginning of his report that he believed that she had been murdered, that this wasn't some accident, this wasn't just somebody who fell off the end of the locomotive. He believed that she had indeed been killed by someone with malicious intent, believing that the crime had been planned in New York and committed somewhere in the near area approaching Philadelphia. I would like to read something from the book here on page 6. The letter ends there. We are told, subsequent to this, 2 employees of Philadelphia and Reading Railroads found the remains of the woman. Her head had been popped open, skull pulverized, eliminating any hope of identifying her by facial features. Her legs had also been severed, cracked right below the knees by the wheels of the locomotive. Margaretta Todd was identified only by her jewelry and other unidentified items that apparently revealed her name and address. It is my interpretation of that paragraph and the findings of Gustav Scholler that her skull had been pulverized before she had been hit by the train, and it's a little bit difficult to interpret, but I believe that that is the message that they're trying to convey, and that is why the coroner Scholler thought that she had indeed been murdered. Now, to me, as being someone who has just been presented with this story, and as someone who has responded to several true crime cases here on Black Box Online Radio, I mean, my interpretation of this was that the crime was both personal and impersonal. The person who committed the crime was very worried about getting caught, but also not worried at all. Personal, meaning that her remains were beaten very severely, and she's thrown in front of a train. Someone is trying to hide her identity. They don't want it traced back to them, but they murdered her on a train in a place where her remains would be easily available, and it's making an enormous scene. Personal and impersonal at the same time. And this is someone who is worried about getting caught and not worried at all about getting caught. How on earth could that possibly come together? How could you reconcile that information? Again, I am not a psychologist, I'm not a forensic examiner, nothing of the sort, just someone who has read a couple books and responded to true crime documentaries here on Black Box Online Radio. And my answer to that is, this was a murder for hire. That is my initial suspicion about the death of Margaretta Todd, that someone had set her up, and then maybe the person who had orchestrated the murder of Margaretta Todd didn't do the actual actions involving her death, but rather had henchmen, followers, some other people commit this type of crime. And I think that would explain the details in which surrounding the death of Margaretta Todd. But this story does not end there. No, absolutely not. Because I would like to go to page 7 in the book that has a possible either suspect or someone who has prior knowledge or somebody who could have been involved in some way. And I'll actually read 2 paragraphs. What Scholler learned is that Margaretta Todd led a complicated personal life. She was a wealthy woman with various men, one of whom lived in the building she owned and a daughter. Scholler learned that Margaretta had apparently departed on her fateful journey without having signed her most recent will. This begs the question about 2 mystery men who were on the train, representing somehow the interests of potential beneficiaries of the will. Of all the people to have been on the train between New York and Philadelphia that night was none other than Margaretta Todd's own alleged husband, Louis Todd. And it does say in the book as well that Louis Todd was her 3rd husband. So that's one person who may have had a motive to, again, be involved with this, even if he wasn't the person who actually committed all the fatal injuries. Maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, I just gave my 2 cents on the subject at the beginning, in my own unprofessional opinion, but he is someone who would have been there, and as you heard, she had not updated her will, so maybe somebody was worried about getting cut out. But there's another person who was on the train that night, and there's a reason why I showed you the video at the beginning again, and that man's name was Ingersoll Lockwood. And if you didn't hear last week's episode on the Anything Goes Friday segment, Ingersoll Lockwood was an attorney. He was a writer. He wrote about a fictional character named Baron Trump, and some people think that he had the ability to see the future. And another alternative theory to that is that he was part of a group that had a type of secret knowledge. You know how they talk about the Illuminati, and they say that the Illuminati has secret knowledge of what's going on in the world, or they understand how global events are actually taking place. Some people even think that this group, the Illuminati, is orchestrating the events. Other people don't like the term Illuminati, and they simply want to say that it's just the globalists, the people who are trying to promote the concept of globalism, and they want to turn humans into some type of mindless controlled organism that are just going to be completely obedient to the corporate elites, so to speak. There are lots of theories and interpretations on this out there, but Ingersoll Lockwood, the person who's the subject of Volume 1 in the Future series, was on the train as well. Now, was he part of some type of global elite plan? Well, why? Why? Like, you might be wondering that, well, why would this woman, Margaretta Todd, have anything at all to do with the global elites? She's murdered. She's in her 70s, mind you. She's somewhat of an elderly woman, and that again could also be a motive why someone was worried that they would be cut out of her will. And as I was reading the book as well, I was just wondering, where is this going to go? How could there be any connection between this woman, Margaretta Todd, and any of the global elite circles? And we finally get an answer to that on page 44 in the book. Actually, page 40, excuse me. And this relates to the Napoleonic era. We might think about Napoleon I, Napoleon Bonaparte, in the early part of the 1800s. But as I said, the murder of Margaretta Todd took place in 1905. And when I was in high school, in the wonderful West Virginia public school system, they would talk about Napoleon's successors a little bit. They might say something, oh yeah, Napoleon III, and there's some connections to the Americas. Very, very general. They would just kind of breeze over them. But what happened to Napoleon's successors? Well, this book here even talks about Napoleon IV, saying that he died in a conflict with the Zulu tribe, and that is indeed the same Zulu tribe that is featured in that famous movie. But also, by the time we get to 1905, Napoleon's grandnephew was Charles Joseph Bonaparte. And Charles Joseph Bonaparte actually had a role in the Theodore Roosevelt administration. He was a member of Roosevelt's cabinet. And yes, all of this is discussed here in the book. And that he, for a while, was Secretary of the Navy and then Attorney General. And he was spent a lot of his life in Baltimore, Maryland. He was born in Baltimore and died in Baltimore, Maryland. So the Bonaparte family and their lineage has made its way well into the circles of the American elites. But in 1905, Margaretta Todd is murdered. And this book proposes that it's possible that Margaretta Todd had a relationship with not Napoleon IV, not Charles Joseph Bonaparte, but Napoleon III. And not only did she have a relationship with him, but she was also the mother of his child. And the daughter of Margaretta Todd was named Rosalie Tousey, Tousey. And I would actually like to read something from page 40 here in the book. How might any of this had anything to do with Margaretta Todd and her daughter Rosalie Tousey? If Rosalie was indeed the daughter of Napoleon III, they may have stood in the way of Victor and other Bonaparte claimants, and Margaretta may have been poised to make the claim. In other words, both women could have possibly been murdered over the claim to the throne of France. Within that stunning possibility, let's take a closer look at the context of related facts and possibilities. Rosalie Tousey died in the south of France in 1906, the year after her mother was brutally killed. The significance of where Rosalie died, possibly of poisoning, becomes more important once you know more of the context. Charles Bonaparte married Ellen Channing Day in 1875. Ellen was born in 1852, 2 years after Mary Ellen Day, a.k.a. Molly, who married Ambrose Bierce in 1871, until their divorce in 1905. Molly Bierce's father was Colonel Holland Hines Day, a merchant and then a mining superintendent. His parents are unidentified, so we cannot connect them to Ellen Channing Day's family, so we must consider that it's a possibility. If so, Charles Bonaparte had a conduit to be acquainted with Molly Day Bierce, and thus Ambrose, who during his time in England was friends with the previously mentioned James Mortimer, a close supporter and friend of Napoleon III. So as you can see, this book has taken a very dramatic turn, not zoning in only on somebody wants to murder Margaretta Todd so they can have access to her will. Is it possible that she was the lover of Napoleon III and mothered his child, Rosalie Toussaint? And Rosalie Toussaint, as you heard very clearly, died in 1906 in the south of France. But one thing I think the book did not convince me of is that she was actually poisoned. And as you heard there in that paragraph, it's more presented as a possibility rather than a fact. I mean, it seems very, very detailed when it's talking about the death of Margaretta Todd, and they have the coroner's report, and they have all of these pieces of facts and information talking about how Margaretta Todd was indeed murdered. But I believe that it is only presented as a possibility that Rosalie Toussaint, her daughter, was indeed killed by somebody or taken out, or they're trying to protect this dark secret. But the reason why I said page 44 mistakenly earlier was because page 44 is where it begins to talk about Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer. And I will have to save that information for next week's Zodiac Monday. So as always, you can like and subscribe to the channel if you want to follow along with all of this. But the book really takes a very strong turn from talking about the murder of Margaretta Todd and this whole Napoleonic angle to simply looking at the activities of the global elites and how there could be this very small sect of global elite activities that are committing occult rituals. If you've ever looked into any type of conspiracy theory, or if you follow conspiracy theorists regularly, you might hear them talk about how there are people in the government or the military or any of the maybe high-ranking CEOs of important companies that from time to time they accuse them of participating in very bizarre and twisted occult rituals. Well, some of that here is discussed in the book, and I would like to read just this quotation here, and it's actually from a different writer, but it is cited, and it is by Nigel Graddon, actually, Graddon. Graddon proposes that the German influence was behind it all. Our study of the rapidly evolving occult dynamic of 19th century European society and its religious and political affairs has revealed at its core an insidious presence of a long-established Germanic negative and mystical tradition and structure. For every new esoteric group that sprang forth during the age of the irrational, whether under the flag of spiritualism, theosophy, Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, Neo-Templarism, ceremonial magic, or any other ism, one can trace its occult genesis to the corrupting influence of an ancient Teutonic tribal ambition. And my interpretation of that particular paragraph is that the global elites have these types of secret rituals that have been going back all the way until the dawn of civilization, because there's some type of guarded secret knowledge, and the Lost Future series talks a lot about guarded secret knowledge. And I'll say more about this on the Zodiac Mondays segment, because he really ties it into Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer. But also, I think that there is something that is a little bit lacking from that presentation, because when I was introduced to these types of conspiracy theories, it wasn't done through a German influential lens. It was done through a French influential lens, French by way of Venice. And you must have heard something about the Empire of Venice and the theory of the Black Venetians. I have a whole episode about that was done on one of these Anything Goes segments. And that is that there is this, well, it's a simple concept that elite societies, politicians, people in power promote certain types of thinking because it allows them to control the people. If you control how people think, you control everything. They support writers and thinkers and philosophers and publications that are beneficial to their agenda. And it doesn't, that doesn't exactly zone in on the Germans, but rather the French, meaning that the whole French age of enlightenment and the whole age of reason and so on was manufactured by the Empire of Venice, by Venetians, because, again, the banksters in Venice, in Italy, are using their financial means to support writers and thinkers that are promoting an idea that is beneficial to their agenda, whether it's Voltaire or it is de Montesquieu or Rousseau. The entire French Enlightenment was more or less a hoax. And I know that this stuff is controversial, and I know that this stuff is interpretive, and that's what it is. It's more or less an interpretation of historical findings that the Age of Enlightenment was supposed to be about metaphysics and divine love, but that's not beneficial to people who are trying to make a profit off of humanity. If anything, that would be detrimental to people who are trying to make a profit off of humanity. So instead, what they want to do is they want to promote people like Voltaire, who say things like, oh, if you get people to believe absurdities, they will commit atrocities. Well, yeah, of course, but that's just a little quipper saying. What does that really have any value? Or how about somebody like Rousseau, who's saying that man is in his most gentle state with nature? Well, again, that doesn't really get people to overthrow a government, now does it? Instead, it's just more like, I like trees, I like the rocks, I like the dirt, I like the sky, and it's putting people... We're trying to get a large portion of the population to develop a thought process, a philosophy, an ideology that is not going to threaten the power structure. So this book here, The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd, starts out by talking about her actual murder. The entire second half of the book mostly zones in on that type of thinking, like in this type of how the global elites are manipulating thought. But again, talking about some aspects of the German influences on this, not the French and not the Venetians. But I do have one follow-up about this, because there are different stages of the Venetians and how they try to influence human thought. One of them is through the, it's in the 1600s with the 30 Years' War, which ending with the Peace of Westphalia, and that was done mostly by an ideologue named Paolo Sarpi. But then when you get to the 1700s and the 1800s, and by that I mean the 1790s into around the turn of the century, there are two principal individuals who are working for the government of Venice, and I shouldn't have said that. It's the elite circles of Venice. They have these salons where intellectuals gather around, and they're plotting and planning, and doesn't have to be government, it's just oligarchs. It's just concentrations of wealth and concentrations of power, but there are two particular individuals. One is named Abate Antonio Conti, and the other is named Giovanni Gianmaria Ortes. He's often just referred to as Gianmaria Ortes. And while Abate Antonio Conti would be the person who is heavily supporting in kind of orchestrating the actions of the French Enlightenment, he was also the person who was in charge of the correspondence between Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz and Isaac Newton, even down to a simple fact of history about who discovered calculus. And there's apparently this type of discussion going on between Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz about who actually discovered calculus, and that they stole the discovery of calculus from Gottfried Leibniz and attributed it solely to Isaac Newton because he was more beneficial to the political, economical elites of the time. Now, that's a very controversial claim, but I did ask my Amazon Alexa once who discovered calculus, and she said Gottfried Leibniz and Isaac Newton, so now they're both credited for it. Thank you to Jeff Bezos for spying on me and providing me with that one piece of factual information about the global elites. But with Gianmaria Ortes, he isn't only about the French Enlightenment. This is a little bit later on then, right? This is talking about post-American independence. And Gianmaria Ortes would go on to inspire a lot of British writers as opposed to French. And the writers in particular would be Malthus, Jeremy Bentham, James Mill, and John Stuart Mill. Although I'm really quite curious to know exactly how John Stuart Mill would have been accused of like plagiarizing Ortes the way that the other guys get accused of. Instead, I think that it's more about John Stuart Mill looked at the writings of this Italian thinker Giovanni Giammaria Ortez, and he expanded upon them because he wasn't even looking at them directly. He was looking at James Mill's work, his father's, and he expanded upon his work. And anytime I went through his writings, I was trying to find the parallelisms. I couldn't do it. But that was all from a long time ago. So the whole point is, there are these ideas coming out of Venice that are influencing modern thought, they're influencing culture, they're influencing the way that people think, the contemporary ideas of the time, and one of them is the carrying capacity, Malthusianism. As I said, Malthus is heavily inspired by Giovanni Giammaria Ortez, the carrying capacity that the world is going to become so overpopulated that there won't be enough food for everyone. And Ebenezer Scrooge even talks about this in A Christmas Carol, saying that the workers need to die and decrease the surplus population, a Malthusian idea which originally came from Venice, from Ortez, because what Ortez wanted to do was he wanted to quantify humanity, and he wanted to turn human beings into numbers. He wanted to turn everything into numbers. He viewed the human body as just a ball of flesh, bone, ligament, and tendon, and that's just all it was. Like, just trying to act like everybody is just this object or a number. And you could even see this in some of the more 20th century people who are saying things like and I mean, again, someone I don't even want to mention, but Richard Dawkins said that, well, humans are just lumbering robots with brains instead of computer chips, so a lumbering robot with a brain. Well, that's very similar to this influence that has been carried on since the 1700s, and people often have the same types of debates that they in the 1700s that they are having today. We're just kind of going in circles. It's like the repetitions of history, so on. But that's stuff that's covered here in this particular book, The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd. As I said, the first part of the book is about her actual murder, and that's the only real observation and detail that I can provide to you guys is I believe that she was some type of I believe she was set up, or that this was not some personal killing, but rather someone had directed other people to commit the murder, and it definitely does seem like an individual had a motive. Do you think it's just a simple case? Was she murdered by her husband because he was afraid of getting cut out of her will and divorced, and she wouldn't have access to the funds that would be available to him? He wouldn't have access to her money, rather. Well, to get back to Margaretta Todd's story, there's a section here on page 73 about Ingersoll Lockwood, and we can look at a different theory. Consider next the possibility that a time traveler told Lockwood that Margaretta Todd would be murdered. In the first volume, we presented Charles Howard Johnson, the mysterious artist who may have been the model for the time-traveling character in the 1970 by Jack Finney. And yes, Charles Howard Johnson, he was mentioned in the first book. He is the person who made an illustration of Baron Trump in the 1800s. And did he actually draw the real life son of Donald Trump? And did he actually capture that person? Does he have some type of secret knowledge? Did Johnson communicate with Lockwood about Margaretta Todd's murder? If so, consider Lockwood's position. Much like the fraudulent idiots in present-day ufology, well, I don't think those people are fraudulent idiots. I think they're just, they think in a different way. Johnson would have appeared as a strange guy claiming to be a time traveler. Lockwood would have decided to act upon his mere testimony and a man's claim, which he could not verify. Remember, Lockwood would not have had his prescient books, as the events didn't come to fruition until after his death. Now, what if Lockwood actually saw the future via some type of looking-glass technology? That would again raise the ethics question. If Lockwood actually had a means by which he could actually see into the future, then we must consider that he didn't warn Margaretta Todd. Anything associated with time traveling, I'm very skeptical of, and I do not entertain those things very clearly, and I think that there is a little bit of stitching together some pieces of info that maybe do not belong together. But what if seeing the future in some technological or metaphysical manner involves seeing intention, like the movie Minority Report? If you haven't seen the movie Minority Report, they develop a system using three people called precogs, like precognition, to predict when crimes are going to happen. And they have this color-coded system using the red ball and the brown ball. A brown ball is a premeditated murder, but it's arresting people before the crime actually took place. and they want to know, could there be some type of glitch in the system? I personally do not entertain too many theories like that because of a very simple reason. And I know this comes from Free Domain Radio. I just want to say that it's not my own observation. I was listening to a discussion on that program once, and the host said, "You're using the unknown to prove the unknown." Okay, so what was Ingersoll Lockwood doing on the train the night that Margaretta Todd was murdered? Well, we don't know. And what's your explanation that he has some type of technology that we aren't sure about whether it exists or not, using the unknown to prove the unknown? So I will challenge those things, but I think that, if anything, this claim about Margaretta Todd being involved with Napoleon III, all right, I will definitely hear you out there. I'll definitely look at all of your historical findings. But I do also want to make one note that this book here provides as many questions as it does declarative sentences. In fact, I think it's about 50-50. A lot of questions are asked to the reader and asked to us to try and answer as opposed to giving us the straight answers themselves. So I will definitely want to learn more about Napoleon III and a relationship with Margaretta Todd, and that was Rosalie Toussaint, the daughter of Napoleon. But again, it isn't so much presented that she was poisoned as a solid fact, or that she was poisoned because she could have been an heir or a successor to Napoleon. I don't believe that that has been established as a fact, and I definitely believe that somebody would have had it out for Margaretta Todd if all of these things are true, and they do provide the statements from the coroner in this book, so that leads me to believe that she was perhaps murdered because of some type of calculated issue, not like some maniac who just went crazy on her. No, I don't think so. As I said, personal and impersonal, worried and not worried. That made me think that this was a murder for hire done by henchmen or thugs. But what do you think about the curious case of Margaretta Todd? And what do you think about this connection that this book has established that, all right, she may have been murdered because she was the mother of Napoleon III's daughter? Well, that's just what this whole spiel on me rambling about the Venetian oligarchs was. It's saying that the governments, the rich, the elites, the globalists, the oligarchs, they do things that the general public is not always aware of. They operate in the shadows. They do things that we don't always have knowledge of. And it's up to us to solve the mystery. Please weigh in the comment section down below. You can share anything that you want in the comment section. I would love to read your comments, and maybe they will be used in a future AMA on the Wednesday shows where I respond to all of you guys. And as I said, I will definitely do more about the material involving Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer on Zodiac Mondays. Thank you so much to Todd Wood for providing me with copies of these books. I liked both of them, and you can definitely look for them anywhere books are sold. Thank you once again, and this is published by Corvos Books, Corvos, Corvos Books, if anyone would like to read the Lost Future series. Okay, and that's all for me now. I will see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.